I've been a photographer for over 10 years, and I live in a small town near Charleston, South Carolina. I've done work for magazines, agencies, and a lot of personal projects, but it was never about the money or the recognition. It was always about freezing that one perfect moment, the kind of image that steals your breath for a second when you look at it. I never believed in anything supernatural. Ghost stories, legends about graveyards, those always felt like poetic ways to explain things people couldn't understand. But what happened to me during a lunar eclipse still keeps me up at night. And the worst part, I wasn't the only one affected. It all started when I read about a rare total lunar eclipse. It would only be visible from certain parts of the US, and the moon was supposed to turn a deep red for a few minutes. The kind of light it would cast on the city was unlike anything I had ever captured before. I was immediately excited. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. St. Helena Cemetery, an old burial ground just outside of town. It's filled with weather-worn marble statues, wilted flowers, and narrow paths that feel like they're stuck in another era. I packed up my gear, checked the batteries and memory cards, and headed out around 9. The air was thick with humidity, typical of coastal nights. My skin was sticky from the heat, but inside something colder was creeping in, an uneasiness I couldn't name. I figured it was just the anticipation of getting a great shot, or maybe the lack of sleep catching up to me. On my way there, I passed by Ms. Martha's house. She's been my neighbor since I was a kid. She was watering her plants near the sidewalk, and when she saw me with my backpack and tripod, she called out softly, "Not a night to be wandering among the dead, Ethan." I gave her a quick smile and replied, "Just going for a photo." She didn't argue, but the way she looked at me unsettled me more than I cared to admit. The walk to the cemetery didn't take long. I'd visited it for years, always for photography. It never scared me, but that night felt different. The sky was clear and the moon was already starting to darken around the edges. I positioned myself between two mausoleums, aimed my camera, and waited for the shift in color. I wanted that perfect shot. That's when I felt it. Just as I had my finger on the shutter, I sensed breathing behind me. If you're drawn to stories like this, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell, because what happened next defies reason. At first I assumed it was my imagination, that all too familiar sensation that someone's standing right behind you, even when you know you're alone. I turned quickly, hoping to catch someone off guard, but there was nothing. Just old gravestones, cracked marble, and the dry crunch of branches under my boots. I chuckled nervously, telling myself it was just fatigue, or maybe Martha's warning messing with my head. But the silence, it wasn't normal. It wasn't the kind of quiet you get in a place without traffic or people. It was thicker, like the air itself had stopped moving. Even the insects had gone quiet. I refocused and started shooting. The moon was deep red now, and the lighting was unreal. Statues seemed to breathe under that crimson hue. Everything lined up for the shot I'd been waiting for. I moved through the cemetery's narrow paths, changing angles. The shadows were long and twisted, melting into each other in strange ways. The deeper I went, the heavier my chest felt. It wasn't fear, not yet. More like the discomfort of stepping into a space where you're clearly not welcome. I switched lenses, set up a wide angle, slowed the shutter to better capture the mood. I was completely immersed until I heard it. Not a voice, not a cry, just a faint drag, like fabric brushing against concrete. I stopped, turned off the camera, listened. Nothing, only that suffocating silence. I looked through the viewfinder again. Just as I focused on an angel statue, a chill surged through me, from the base of my skull down to my fingertips. It wasn't the coastal dampness. It was dry and sharp. I flinched, lowering the camera instinctively. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. There was no reason to feel this way. No one was following me. No one was watching me, yet every nerve screamed otherwise. I kept shooting, though my pace changed. I wasn't chasing perfection anymore. I just wanted to be done. The moonlight was fading, the eclipse nearly over. I took one last photo, packed my gear, and left through the same entrance I came in. I didn't look back. Not because I forgot something, but because something inside me begged me not to. Whatever I'd felt, it was still there, still, waiting. What I didn't know then was that some things don't stay where you find them. I got home just before midnight. The walk back was quiet, but my mind was racing. I couldn't wait to see the shots. I made a quick coffee, didn't even take off my backpack, and plugged the camera into my laptop. The first photo popped up. Stunning. Red moonlight over stone, long shadows, almost cinematic composition. I smiled. It was exactly what I'd hoped for. The next shot, different angle, just as good. I felt proud. Then I opened the third, and the smile vanished. Something in that frame didn't belong. On the left side, near a broken cross, there was a dark blur. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a lighting trick. It was solid, dense, like it swallowed the light around it. I zoomed in, tweaked the contrast. It was still there. Vague, yes, but shaped, human-shaped, like someone was crouching among the headstones. I checked the original file in the camera, same thing. My first instinct was technical, maybe a smudge on the lens, a focusing issue, but then I clicked to the next image. The figure was closer, now behind the angel statue, and in the fifth shot it was clearer, taller, like it was standing up. My stomach clenched. I walked to the kitchen, drank some water, trying to steady myself. Maybe I was just seeing things. I went back to the screen. In at least 8 photos, taken between 10:14 and 10:33, that shape appeared. Sometimes faint, sometimes undeniable. What scared me most was that I hadn't seen anything at the time. I'm observant. I catch tiny details for a living. How did I miss this? I zoomed in on one shot. There was something about that shadow that made my skin crawl. It had no face, just blackness. But it was turned toward the camera. No eyes, no mouth, no features, but its posture, its tilt, it knew I was there. Worse, it wanted me to know. I stopped, shut everything down, monitor off, camera unplugged, desk lamp off. I sat on the couch, breathing hard, heart pounding. I told myself again and again it had to be something rational, a glitch, my mistake. But deep down, I already knew. That thing wasn't a trick of the light. It had been there, with me. And now, I couldn't stop looking at it. The next morning, I woke up more exhausted than ever. I tossed all night, caught in fragments of dreams. I couldn't remember specifics, but one image stayed with me. That figure, the one from the photos, just standing there in the dark of my mind, silent, unmoving, watching. I tried to go about my day, bought bread, said hello to the guy at the newspaper stand. Everything looked normal, but the feeling stayed, lingering, like a quiet hum in the back of my skull. That night I sat in the living room, laptop open, forced myself to go through the photos again. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe daylight would make it all less eerie. But no, the figures were still there, and the more I looked, the more certain I became that in each photo they were getting closer. The one that disturbed me the most showed the figure standing in front of a small grave. Its posture was tense, like it was deciding whether to move. It didn't look like something caught accidentally in the frame. It looked like intent, like it was considering its next step. I shut off the screen and went to splash cold water on my face. I needed to break the spiral in my head. But as I bent down over the sink, I froze. There was a faint creak coming from the hallway that led to my bedroom. I stood perfectly still, holding my breath. Then another sound, a soft footstep, not heavy, more like bare feet gliding across old wooden floors. I rushed out of the bathroom, checked every room, nothing, doors locked, windows untouched. The clock read 2:41 a.m. I went back to the bedroom, heart pounding. I left the light on, lay down, and the moment I closed my eyes, I felt it again. Breathing, slow, damp, right next to my left ear. I shot up, no one there, but the air was freezing, far colder than it had been. I checked the digital thermometer next to my desk. 60-degree tough, in the middle of a sweltering Charleston summer. I didn't sleep another second that night, and it wouldn't be the last time I felt that presence. In the days that followed, the sounds became routine. Short, shuffling steps, a distant whisper barely masked by the hum of the ceiling fan. The creeping feeling that someone was standing just behind me as I edited photos. I started glancing over my shoulder constantly, convinced I was being watched. But I never caught anything directly, only in the mirrors or the corners of my vision. The most unsettling part was the realization building inside me. I wasn't alone anymore. I brought something back from that cemetery, and now it lived at the edges of my space, like a shadow that never fully detaches. The question was, what did it want? I couldn't keep carrying this by myself. After nearly a week without decent sleep, eyes bloodshot, my spirit drained, I decided to talk to someone. The only person who came to mind was Ben. He's a photographer too, more technical than artistic, but one of the few people I trust completely. I invited him over under the pretense of showing him a new project. I didn't want to dump everything on him immediately. I was scared he'd think I was losing it. When he arrived, he looked concerned, asked if I was okay, that I looked thinner, like I hadn't rested in days. I blamed it on stress. I hooked my camera up to the TV and showed him the cemetery photos. The first ones impressed him. He commented on the lighting, the moon's hue, the haunting atmosphere. But once we reached the images with the figure, he went silent. "What's this?" he asked. I explained that I hadn't seen anything when I took the shots, that the silhouettes only appeared afterward. He stepped closer to the screen, inspecting the details. "Were you using long exposure?" he asked. I told him no. All standard shutter speeds. Then came the answer I was expecting. Maybe a sensor glitch, dust or lens smudge. I showed him more. Demonstrated how the figure seemed to shift position in each frame, moving closer, becoming clearer. His face grew serious, but he still wasn't convinced. I asked him to stay for a while. I told him I'd been hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, that I just needed to know if it was me or something else. He agreed, half joking. Sat on the couch while I made some coffee. No more than 10 minutes passed before it happened. We were talking, trying to lighten the mood, when suddenly a heavy book flew off the shelf. No one touched it. It landed hard, open-faced on the rug. Ben jumped up, looked at the book, then at me. The silence thickened. "Was it balanced right?" he asked. I nodded. "No one's touched that in days." We didn't speak for several seconds. Then he whispered, "Okay, I believe you." After that, everything escalated. Lights flickered more often. Electronics shut off randomly. And when Ben came by a few days later, he told me he'd been having nightmares since his last visit. Asked me not to call him for a while. That's when it clicked. I wasn't just being followed. Whatever this was, it could spread. That made it so much more dangerous. I couldn't keep living like this. Every day felt worse. I was constantly on edge, waiting for the next sound, the next flicker, the next failure. My home, once my safe place, had become a trap. If there was any chance to stop this, to undo whatever I'd triggered, I had to return to where it began. One morning, I gathered my nerve and went back to St. Helena Cemetery. It was a Saturday, close to noon. The sun was relentless, and the South Carolina heat hit like a wall. Unlike that night, the place was alive. Visitors were placing flowers, caretakers cleaned the gravestones, children ran between the headstones, still too young to grasp the names carved into stone. I wandered aimlessly, scanning everything. Nothing seemed out of place. Everything looked normal, but I felt the opposite. As if the calm was just a disguise, as if something lurked below the surface, hiding beneath the daylight. That's when I saw her. An elderly woman sat beside a grave covered in faded flowers. She wore a mustard yellow headscarf and simple clothes. She was cleaning the stone with a damp rag. Slow, steady movements. I watched her for a moment, unsure whether to approach. Eventually I did. "Good afternoon," Sorry to bother you, I said quietly. She looked up. Her eyes were deep and dark, like they held entire lifetimes. She didn't say a word. I know it might sound strange, but I was here a few nights ago. During the eclipse, I added. I took some photos, and since then, strange things have been happening, things I can't explain. She stopped cleaning, looked straight at me, her expression unchanged. Don't delete them, she said. I'm sorry. The photos. Don't erase them. If you've seen them, they've seen you. A chill went through me. What do you mean? I asked. There are nights when the moon becomes a key. And if you look, they look back. Some souls never crossed over. They linger. They cling to anyone who notices. She spoke calmly, like explaining why bread goes stale with time. You shouldn't have walked here that night. Not just because of the eclipse. That date, it repeats every few years. People forget. The earth doesn't. Then she crossed herself and resumed cleaning, as if her part was done. I walked away silently, with more questions than answers. And one thought thudding in my mind, it wasn't a coincidence. That night had weight, and I'd been in the wrong place at the exact right time. Whatever followed me hadn't let go. I left the cemetery with my stomach in knots. Not because of the heat or something I ate, but because of her words. That woman who knew nothing about me had described exactly what I was going through, without prompting, without surprise, as if she'd heard it before, as if it were common. I realized then I had to learn more. I couldn't just stumble in the dark. I thought about all the stories I'd heard over the years about spiritual healers, mediums, or people who know things. But I didn't want some New Age act. I wanted someone serious, grounded, someone who studied, not performed. That's when I remembered something Ben had once mentioned during a conversation about urban legends. He'd told me about a retired professor from the University of Georgia, Dr. Elijah Morgan, a man who spent his life studying oral traditions, ancient rituals, and unexplained phenomena. According to Ben, even skeptics respected him. I tracked down his address through a mutual contact. An old house, cluttered with dry plants and books stacked to the ceiling. I knocked, unsure if he still lived there. He did. A thin man with ink-stained hands and a quiet stare opened the door. He let me in without a question. I told him everything, from the cemetery to the photos. I showed him the less disturbing images, the ones that didn't instantly provoke fear. He watched silently, barely blinking. Then he grabbed a magnifying glass, inspected the screen, leaned back, and exhaled deeply. This isn't the first time someone's brought me something like this, he finally said, but yours is different. It's documented, step by step. That's rare. I asked him what it could be. Residue, he said. Not spirits in the way we think. More like fragments, stains, like grease that doesn't wash off with water. They cling to places where something unresolved happened. A guilt, a restless death, a buried secret. Why me? I asked. Because you gave them shape. By capturing them in that precise moment, when the veil thins, you fix them in place. You acknowledge them, and now they acknowledge you. It felt like I couldn't breathe, like I'd unknowingly signed a contract. Like once you see them, there's no unseeing. What do they want? I asked. He paused. Life, warmth, a presence. They want to be where you are. I left that house with my mind racing. I didn't have clear answers, but I had a new certainty. These figures weren't just shadows. They weren't echoes of the cemetery. They were active. They were aware. And the worst part, they knew exactly where to find me. After leaving Dr. Morgan's house, I didn't head straight home. I needed to walk, clear my mind, think without walls pressing in. The sky was overcast, and the air carried that thick scent that comes just before rain. I wandered, without intending to, into the historic district of Savannah. Cobblestone streets, iron lampposts, shopkeepers closing up for the night. People passing by unaware, I carried something unseen, something clinging silently to my back. I moved aimlessly, down one of those narrow alleys that connect the touristy parts of town to the older neighborhoods. It was a tight passage, lined with tall, crumbling brick walls and flickering streetlights casting a yellowish glow onto damp stones. And then, halfway through that alley, it happened. First came the silence. Not the usual kind, but something thick, suffocating, like someone had switched off every sound around me. Then the air shifted. A cold gust, sharp and unnatural, brushed across my face. I stopped, looked back, nothing. Looked ahead, still nothing. And then I felt it, a crushing pressure in my chest, like something was pressing against me from the inside out. My legs went weak. I stepped backward, and that's when I saw the first shadow. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't some vague blur. It was real, standing right at the edge of the lamplight, as if waiting for permission to step closer. Instinctively, I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around the small wooden charm my grandmother had given me years ago. A tiny carved hand she said was for protection. I'd kept it all this time, without thinking much of it. But the moment my skin touched the charm, the figure recoiled, as if something had held it back. But it didn't leave. Behind it, others began to emerge. Slender silhouettes, some barely visible, others thick and dark. They poured from corners, walls, shadows, surrounded me in perfect silence. The air thickened until it felt like I was drowning in it. And then, one of them stepped forward. I could see it more clearly now. It had no face, but a defined outline, a thin frame, long arms, a crooked neck. It reached toward me. I don't know how, but I screamed, with everything I had left. And as I did, I raised the charm and bolted. I tripped more than once. I could hear the footsteps behind me, real, solid, not imagined. They were there, following. I didn't stop until I reached a plaza lit with people, voices, life. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, shaking, and with one truth echoing inside me. They didn't just watch me, they could touch me, they could reach me, and they wanted more than just attention. They wanted in. After that night in the alley, I knew I couldn't keep running. Hiding in my apartment or avoiding certain places wasn't enough. The shadows knew who I was. I'd been marked, and whatever they were after, it wasn't going to stop until they had it. My only option was to confront them. I went back to Dr. Morgan. This time, not as a curious man, but as someone at the edge of desperation. I told him everything, about the alley, about how one of them almost made contact. He didn't flinch, just nodded slowly, as if he'd expected it all along. "The new moon is approaching," he said. "Total darkness can work in your favor. Sometimes, when the light recedes completely, what hides becomes visible." He told me about certain protection rituals, not mystical performances, but symbolic acts. Simple, grounded things, coarse salt, open flame, objects charged with emotional weight, things that affirm life in the presence of negation. He recommended I go back to the cemetery, to the exact spot where it all began. There, he said, I might be able to sever the bond. I didn't want to go alone, so I called Ben. He hesitated naturally, but after what he'd witnessed in my home, he knew this was real. We agreed to go together on the night of the new moon. We arrived at St. Helena Cemetery just past 11. No one else was there, just the faint rustle of wind through gravestones and the crunch of our footsteps. We made our way to the central crossroad, where the oldest statues stood like sentinels of the forgotten past. There, we formed a circle of salt. In the center, I placed the eclipse photos, white candles, and my grandmother's wooden charm, which no longer felt like a simple keepsake. The air thickened almost immediately. The candles flickered violently. Wind began to spiral in unnatural directions. And then I saw them. They emerged from the shadows as though they'd always been part of them. They didn't walk. They didn't float. They just were. Several of them, different forms. some distinct, others little more than outlines, but all of them focused on the circle. Ben whispered a prayer I didn't recognize. I stayed silent, holding my camera, not to shoot, but because somehow the camera had opened the door, and maybe it could close it too. I triggered the flash. Once, twice, 3 times. Each burst of light lit up the figures, and they recoiled as if in pain. But it wasn't enough. I could feel them pressing in, wanting to cross. Then I took the original prints, the ones I'd developed, the ones that started everything. I set them on fire inside the circle. The flames rose fast, greenish, unstable. The shadows quivered. A sharp, shrill sound rang in my ears, and then silence. Only the crackling of fire remained. We had made it, for now. After that night in the cemetery, something changed. Not just in the air, but in me. My apartment felt normal again. The lights no longer flickered. I didn't hear footsteps or whispers. The pressure in my chest lifted. It was as if the link had finally snapped. Ben and I didn't talk much afterward. We kept in touch, yes, but we avoided the subject. As if naming it would summon it again. We both knew what had happened. There was no need to repeat it. Time passed. The city kept moving. The heat returned. Traffic resumed. Street vendors, laughter from open windows. Everything looked the same. But inside me, nothing was. I saw the world with different eyes now. Something was gone. Maybe innocence, maybe the arrogance of believing that what we can't explain doesn't exist. I put the camera away, not out of fear, but because I no longer felt the need to capture everything. I stopped hunting for the perfect shot. Instead, I started noticing the things I'd ignored for years. The scent of bread in the morning, neighbors chatting on doorsteps, the colors on worn walls. Details I'd always rushed past. One ordinary afternoon, I took a walk by the coast. The sky was clear, and the sun was dipping toward the horizon. Children ran through the grass. Couples shared ice cream. A street musician tuned his guitar. It was one of those moments you wish you could hold on to. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the sunset. No setup, no filters, just a moment. The image saved, and when I looked at it on the screen, I saw something. A shadow in the lower corner. Faint, barely there. Right where the sun's light touched the water. I paused, squinted, zoomed in. It wasn't clear. Could have been anything, a smudge, a pole, camera shake, but something in me recognized it. I blinked, looked again. Gone. The shadow had vanished, or maybe it was never there. I slowly put the phone away. I didn't feel fear, not cold, just an echo. A familiar trace, like the breath of something forgotten on the back of my neck. And then I understood what Dr. Morgan had told me, what I hadn't wanted to accept at the time. When you see what you're not meant to see, you're marked. Not always with scars, sometimes with memory, sometimes with doubt. Maybe I broke the bond, maybe they left, but knowing they were real, knowing how close they came, that never leaves. The most dangerous shadows aren't the ones walking in the night. They're the ones that stay, the ones that wait, the ones that sometimes hide just behind the lens.